Welcome, Saul, and thank you for taking the time to be on the show today, especially after your recent recognition, including the Chartered Institute of Builders National Award for Sustainability and several other accolades. Your focus on sustainable construction and project management is truly inspiring. And to start, I'd just like you to share what motivated you to start your consultancy. What was your background before this venture, and what do you think makes Saul D Humphrey LLP stand out in the industry?
Thank you. Okay, why did I start the consultant? Let me start with that. I'd worked a long while for RG Carter, local construction company, 33 years. I was just getting the hang of it when I left. But I was very lucky to work with some brilliant people that made my life easy there. Then I went to Morgan Sindall, another large construction company, National PLC, and had 2 great years there. But at some point, I guess I started to think about, what am I doing? Where am I going? What's important in life? And I became more and more cognizant of construction and the built environment's impact. And the quest for perpetual growth, for profit, for ever greater return on capital employed, for profits, for shareholder returns, started to feel a little bit illusionary. And even more so when you realise the impact that construction and the built environment has. We're responsible for somewhere between 38 and 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions. We leave a very heavy footprint on the earth when we construct something, particularly if it's made of cement or steel. And you start to question if we're doing the right thing. You start to question if we couldn't and shouldn't build more sustainably. So you either carry on being part of the problem, or you try and shift the paradigm and try and become part of the solution. So that's what I tried to do. I started Saul D Humphrey LLP. I was really imaginative with the name, wasn't I? And focused on sustainable construction and only that. And that was my key difference. And it was those formative years with 2 large construction companies that enabled me to do that. So I had a bit of knowledge. I was suddenly very exposed because previously, having had great people around me, that made my life easier. Suddenly you're on your own, albeit I had great customers, great clients, and I picked really good professionals to work with to make life easier again. And I was kind of inspired to do that by the people you meet on your journey, the buildings that you build, and those buildings that were more sustainable, those that won awards, I'm associated with. I was with RG Carter when they secured Goldsmith Street. It went on to win the Sterling Prize, Passive House Development. I joined Morgan Sindall just as they were finishing the Enterprise Centre at UEA, BREEAM Outstanding, Passive House, perhaps one of the greenest buildings in the world. So those projects start to influence the way you think and what's important. I spent a lot of time with people like Andy Wood at Adnams and Mark Pendleton, who followed Andy as chair of the LEP, with Jonathan Smales, who'd been managing director of Greenpeace and was then leading a very green development company and still is. And those people started to make me wonder what I'm doing and what I should do to have a purpose, values-led proposition, which felt much more important. So I started the consultancy with that in mind. Let's do good, let's make a difference. And being a B Corp enabled me to position it to not just be about profit, but to balance that with people and place and give a more sustainable offering and be part of the solution rather than continue to be part of the problem.
You have what I'd say is a huge number of additional roles and responsibilities. So I'd be interested in going through some of those, please. Firstly, you are a Professor of Sustainable Construction at Anglia Ruskin University.
Okay, well, I was quite privileged, quite honoured to be asked to join the university. In my youth, I'd decided to do a master's degree and a doctorate, thinking that might equip me well for an alternative career in academia at some point. I probably wouldn't have been the greatest university lecturer, and it probably wasn't ultimately for me to do that. But as an additional role, as a part-time post at the university, it was an honour to accept that position. And the reason I did so is I felt it would help make a difference. If you can reach out to the next generation and help them to deliver the ambitions, deliver the vision, that helps make a change. So that was the key reason for doing it, and I'm delighted to do so.
And you're a chair of the Institute of Directors for Norfolk?
Yeah, so similar. I was asked to do that role, and representing business, representing organisations in Norfolk made sense. I was born in Norfolk. I've spent most of my life here, and that felt right.
You're the chair of the Building Growth Construction and Housing Property Development sector for Norfolk and Suffolk.
Yes, so when New Anglia Local Enterprise Partnership was formed almost a decade ago, Andy Wood was first chair, Mark Pennington second, then Doug Field, then CJ Green. Right at the beginning, they recognised that having a sector group focused on construction, the built environment, development would be a good way to make sure that that sector was heard. And I was honoured to chair it, and I continue to do so today, albeit now the focus is less with the Local Enterprise Partnership and more with the two county councils. But similar role, and I'm pleased to do so.
And can you tell me a bit about Equinox?
Oh, Equinox. So actually I've got two roles with local authorities. Equinox is Great Yarmouth Borough Council's property development company. They're building some new homes for sale, and they're also buying existing stock to provide to rent for people in Great Yarmouth. And I was pleased to give them some support from an industry perspective on their board. But I have a very similar post with Norwich City Council to help them deliver what is the East Norwich vision, the Coleman's Britvic Unilever site on the Deal ground, the old May Gurney site. It's quite a complex piece of urban redevelopment, and I'm pleased to assist them too.
So that's the East Norwich Strategic Regeneration Area?
Correct.
And then you're Managing Director Designate of Human Nature at Hethel?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier about working with Jonathan Smales. Jonathan's moved from Greenpeace to now leading his own sustainable development company, and he's progressing an option, a very large strategic site at Hethel just outside Wymondham, with the ambition to make that the most sustainable development in the UK and possibly Europe. So if I can help in that regard, that again helps make a difference, helps deal with the housing crisis in a very sustainable way.
And then you're an ambassador of the NCEC.
Oh, well, there's three of us. Norfolk Construction Excellence Club. Yeah, that's been going for some years now, probably 15 years, and meet roughly once a month. There's a committee who are much better than me. There's a chair, there's a treasurer, there's a vice chair, much more important people. I'm just pleased to be in the background and support what they do.
And then, of course, you're involved with a Norfolk Community Foundation for Good.
Yeah, so that's actually launching next week, but I've been asked to join their sort of ambassador board for that, and I perhaps should let them say more about it when they announce it and when it moves forward. But as the name suggests, doing good seems to align very nicely with what Norfolk Community Foundation are doing.
You're also involved with Changing Streams CIC. What's that, please?
Yeah, charitable organisation focused on trying to stop pollution from plastics. Construction is the biggest user of plastics and is probably responsible for 20% of all that waste, too much of which ends up in oceans, seas and rivers. So if we could build more sustainably and use plastic more responsibly or less of it, that would be a good thing.
And of course, you're a member of the Green Building Council.
Yeah, UK Green Building Council, one of a number of organisations that I'm a member of, but that one sits very comfortably with what I do as the day job. Their whole focus is on trying to reduce construction's footprint and its emissions, pollution, and improving biodiversity.
You have quite a list of interesting positions there, Saul, but I understand you're also involved with University of Suffolk on the board there?
Yeah, that's the board that focuses on sustainability, and I'm obviously pleased to do that because it sits very comfortable with what I do.
And Norfolk Net Zero Advisory Board.
Yeah, so most of the local authorities are working together in that regard to encourage and accelerate the move towards net zero, and I'm pleased to support them in that ambition.
Tell me a little bit about the Construction Leadership Council.
Yes, so Construction Leadership Council sits above all of the other professional organisations in the construction industry, And as a business partner, I'm nicely aligned with their ambitions, which sit comfortably again with trying to build more sustainably.
And of course, there's Construction East.
New organisation, Rob Panther and others, all of whom are better and more gifted than me, are trying to work hard to improve the next generation of skills coming into the industry. We're not very good at teaching higher education in Norfolk and Suffolk in construction or the built environment. Our students have to go out of the county to get that training at the moment. So we're working with Anglia, Ruskin University, with some of the FE colleges, City College, Norwich, East Coast College, trying to make sure that we can deliver those skills closer to home, so make sure that the next generation of talent doesn't have to go too far away to learn what they need to deliver the skills that we require locally.
And I believe there are two more positions you volunteer for, one being sounding board.
Yeah, so Richard Ross at Chadwick's initiated Sounding Board. Lovely vehicle. Basically, as the name suggests, a group of people who act as a sounding board to businesses that ask for some independent advice. So I sit normally with a colleague, we mix it up a little bit, and we might spend 6 sessions with a business acting as a non-exec director, giving them a peer review of their business. It might be they recognise they've got a challenge to grow, to deal with an opportunity or a threat, and we can give some objective, honest advice to help them to realise their ambitions. And if they're happy with the advice they get, then they're asked to make a charitable donation. So that ties up very nicely.
And finally, you've got ProHelp.
Yeah, so linked to Norfolk Community Foundation, ProHelp is the organisation that helps the charities by giving them a pro bono professional advice to realise their ambitions. They might want some help with renegotiating a lease or a dilapidation survey or that sort of thing. So I'm pretty pleased to help in that regard too.
Now, I know that we haven't discussed this, but how do you manage their time and your time?
Yeah, I'm not great at that. I wish I was better at time management, but you try and prioritise, don't you? You try and do what seems most important first. And then underlying all that, try and ask yourself what's going to make the best impact, make the most difference, and do the things that can help to realise that view. Align it with the core purpose and do the things that will help in that regard.
You're also chartered in everything. You've been recognised as a construction industry's most sustainable professional. You have a staggering 27,000 LinkedIn followers and often quoted in magazines, newspapers, on TV and in the construction industry. I mean, how on earth do you manage everything, and why do you support so many different causes?
Wow, okay, that's a good question. Perhaps slightly humbling to reflect on that for a second, but I do what I do to try and make that difference that I talked about, to try and get the maximum impact, and do what feels right. I don't always get it right. I certainly don't manage my diary as well as I would like, but I work with good people, and if you do that, that's really satisfying. And if you're getting the right outcomes, which realises the purpose, the vision you set in the first place, with that multiplier effect, by making the impact by working with the right people, with the right outreach, then I think we can make the biggest difference. So that's why I do it, and I hope that's working a little bit.
So I can see how these multiple appointments and responsibilities align, but why do you think it's so important that construction becomes more sustainable?
I think I alluded to it earlier that we now know that construction and the built environment is responsible globally for something like 38 to 40% of all greenhouse gas emissions. It's not quite as bad in this country. That's not because we're good at construction. It's just that we do other things that negate construction's impact. You know, we have too many cars, we fly to too many holidays, and therefore construction impact is not quite as bad. But globally, 40%, 38, 40% is a horrible number. We have a major impact on pollution, on material extraction, plastics, water, biodiversity loss. Construction's not great. And you can imagine every building we build is there for the long term. So building it right in the first place, and how we build it is really important if we want to reduce embodied carbon, the upfront carbon, in the materials we use. But because the building might last 50 or 100 years, how it gets its heat, its light, If it doesn't need too much, if we reduce demand first, that helps. But then we need to be using renewable energy if we're going to reduce that operational carbon emission. So the impact we can make by doing things correctly, responsibly, is absolutely enormous. And I think it's incumbent on us all to try and do that.
Going a little bit deeper, what stops construction from just shifting towards being more sustainable? Can you tell me about operational embodied carbon emissions? And how does a sector improve its carbon footprint?
Okay, we've got practices, the status quo, the norm of doing things, which is so well embedded. The expected norm, that's what the banks like, that's what insurers like. The outcomes are predictable. If you use a different material, if you switch concrete for timber, if you switch brick for hemp, you're creating different risk profiles, different material uncertainties. But I think we need to look at those innovations and move towards more bio-based materials. The embodied carbon, the upfront carbon, is in the material itself. We know, this is a phrase I've used too often, but if cement was a country, it'd be the third biggest emitter in the world. If steel was a country, it'd be fifth. And you can imagine how much cement and how much steel is used in construction. So try not to use so much of those materials, but instead use those bio-based materials, materials that grow like timber and hemp and sequester, absorb carbon, would make a huge impact. Because embodied carbon is about a third of all the carbon emissions that we encounter in the industry. 2/3 right now is coming from the operational carbon, the carbon used in heating, cooling, lighting buildings. But again, if we can shift the paradigm towards using renewable energy for those energy sources, then we can make a big impact on that too. Particularly if we can reduce the demand on them first, if we can avoid demolishing buildings, if we can only new build buildings that are actually needed. Don't make them too big. Really obvious things. But then making sure that we rely upon renewable energy to power, to heat, to cool the buildings once they're there. Then we can make a huge impact on those nasty numbers that I alluded to earlier.
So finally, what next do you think for the construction industry? For example, with the expected growth in AI and more focus on sustainability, where do you actually think the industry is going to be in 10 years' time?
10 years' time. I hope those innovations, that technology, the use of artificial intelligence, BIM, digital twins, the utilisation of those ideas will enable us to find better solutions, more optimal choice of design solutions, better material specifications with a cost benefit, a sustainability benefit, and in which case the industry could become perceived to be a friend in 10 years' time rather than part of the problem as it might be perceived today. We've got an ongoing challenge. We've got a housing crisis. We have homes to build. We have critical infrastructure to develop. We've got offshore wind. We've got PV arrays. We've got nuclear power stations. Construction can be at the heart of delivering those requirements that we need, more hospitals, more schools. But we just have to do it more sustainably. And I hope that technology will help us get there.
Thank you so much for giving up your valuable time today, Saul. You've had an incredible career, and I look forward to following your journey in the future. Before we finish, I'd like to ask you one last question, which is, what advice did you get from somebody earlier in your career that you followed and now wish you hadn't?
Wow. I wish I had a snappy answer for that. I can't immediately think of a brilliant answer. I mean, follow your dream, do what makes you happy. Those sorts of whimsical observations are great. I think in my case, I perhaps failed to do that earlier, and I did what I thought I was quite good at or could make money. I'm really pleased that I've now got to a place where I can do what I think feels right. I'm not sure if I've quite answered your question, but in a roundabout way, looking back, I wish I'd done that earlier.
Saul, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.